Our first question concerned the reason or significance of the especial fabric of the building that was before us. There was no special significance in the actual materials of which the palace was constructed, so the Chaldean informed us. The precious stones were proper to the realm which we were now visiting. In our own realm, the buildings are opaque, albeit they have a certain translucence of surface, but they are ponderous and heavy by comparison with the upper realms. We had journeyed through many other spheres to reach this present one, but had we paused to observe the lands through which we had passed, we should have seen a gradual transformation taking place until the relatively heavy-looking materials of our own realm became transmuted into the crystalline substance upon which our gaze was now fastened. But the colors most certainly had a special significance to which I have already alluded. We could see, surrounding the palace, many acres of the most enchanting gardens, laid out in such fashion that, from the distance and elevated viewpoint which we occupied, they presented a huge and intricate pattern as in some superbly wrought eastern carpet. We were told that upon close view or in walking through the gardens, the pattern would be lost, but that we should find ourselves in the midst of delicately arranged flower beds and soft velvety lawns. Though we could scarcely remove our eyes from the superlative glory of the palace and its grounds, yet the Chaldean gently drew our attention to the remainder of the prospect. It extended for miles upon countless miles, or so it seemed to us. The range of our vision was increased in these rarefied regions beyond all human conception, and so it seemed that literally an unending vista spread before us of more earthly miles than it is possible to contemplate. And all through this wide expanse we could see other magnificent buildings built of still more precious stones, of emerald and amethyst, to name but two, and far away what looked like pearl. Each of the different buildings were set amid the most entrancing gardens, where trees were growing of unimaginable richness of color and grandeur of form. Wherever we cast our eyes, there we could see the flashing of jeweled buildings, reflecting back the rays of the central sun, the myriad colors from the flowers, and the scintillations from the waters of the river that flowed before us far away into the distance. As we were gazing spellbound upon the scene, a sudden flash of light seemed to come from the palace directly to the Chaldean, and it was acknowledged by an answering flash which he sent back to the palace. Our presence in the realm was known, and as soon as we had feasted our eyes upon the view, we were asked to walk within the palace where our host would be waiting to receive us. Such was the message contained in the flash of light, as interpreted by the Chaldean. We therefore proceeded at once toward the palace. By the same means of locomotion that had brought us into the sphere, we quickly found ourselves walking upon the terrace beside the river and up a broad flight of steps that led to the main entrance of the palace. The stonework of the terrace and the steps were pure white, but we were much surprised by its apparent softness underfoot, for it was like walking upon the velvet softness of a well-tended lawn. Our footsteps made no sound, but garments rustled as we walked along. Otherwise, our progress would have been a silent one, except for our conversation. There were, of course, many other sounds to be heard. We had not stepped into a realm of silence. The whole air was filled with harmony, sent forth from the volumes of color that abounded upon every hand. The temperature seemed to us much higher than that of our own realm. The Chaldean told us that it was really much higher than we could feel, but that our minds had been attuned to the difference in temperature, just as they had been attuned to the intensity of light. A gentle breeze was pleasantly perceptible as it touched our faces with its heavenly scented breath. As we proceeded through the palace entrance, I should dearly have loved to have lingered to examine more closely the remarkable materials of which the building was composed, but time pressed. Our stay could not be prolonged beyond our capacity to resist the rarity of the atmosphere and the intensity of light, notwithstanding the charge of spiritual force that the Chaldean and the Egyptian had given us. As we passed through, therefore, we had but a fleeting glimpse of the grandeur that encompassed us. So beautifully proportioned were the various apartments and galleries that there was no overbearing loftiness to any one of them, such as one might have expected in an edifice of such dimension. Everywhere that we cast our eyes we could see jeweled walls and jeweled floors. Upon the walls were pictures of pastoral scenes where the artists had utilized every gem known to mortal man, and many others unknown to him, as the medium for his work. These pictures were, in their execution, of a mosaic order, but the effect produced upon the beholder was one of liquid light, if I may use the term. The constituents of the pictures sent forth their rays of light in all the colors that the subject demanded, and the effect upon the eye was one of pure life. The colors themselves were exquisite, and contained many more tones and shades of tones than earthly pigments could provide. It seemed inconceivable that precious stones could exist that had such a wide variety of colors. But then we are in the spirit world, and in a high realm of the spirit world too. As we walked down the corridors, we met and were greeted by the most friendly and gracious beings, who thus added to our welcome. Welcome indeed was the overmastering feeling that enveloped us as we first put foot within the palace. There was no coldness, but everywhere the warmth of friendliness and affection. At last we paused before a small chamber, and the Chaldean told us that we had reached the highest point of our journey. I did not feel exactly nervous, but I wondered what formalities were to be observed, and I was totally unaware of what description these might be, as we all were, except, of course, our two consigliere. I was naturally a little hesitant. The Chaldean, however, immediately reassured us by telling us to follow him, and merely to observe those rules dictated by good taste. We entered. Our host was seated by a window. As soon as he saw us, he rose and came forward to greet us. First he thanked the Chaldean and the Egyptian for bringing us to him. Then he took us each by the hand and bade us be welcome to his home. There were several vacant chairs close to that in which he had been seated, and he suggested that we might like to sit with him there and enjoy the view. It was, he explained, his favorite view. We drew close to the window, and we could see beneath us a bed of the most magnificent white roses, as pure white as a field of snow, and which exhaled an aroma as exalting as the blooms from which it came. White roses, our host told us, were flowers he preferred above all others. We seated ourselves, and I had an opportunity, as a host spoke to us, of observing him at close quarters, where before I had but seen him from a distance. Seeing him thus in his own home and surroundings, his facial appearance was, in general, similar to that which he had presented when he visited us in the temple in our own realm. There were differences, however, as we saw him here, differences that were largely a matter of light intensity. His hair, for example, seemed to be golden when he came to us. Here it seemed to be of a bright golden light, rather than of the color of gold. He looked to be young and to be of eternal youthfulness, but we could feel the countless eons of time, as it is known on earth, that lay behind him. When he spoke, his voice was sheer music, his laugh as a rippling of the waters, but never did I think it possible for one individual to breathe forth such affection, such kindliness, such thoughtfulness, and consideration. And never did I think it possible for one individual to possess such an immensity of knowledge as is possessed by this celestial king. One felt that under the Father of heaven he held the key to all knowledge and wisdom. But, strange as it may sound, though we had been transported unfathomable distances to the presence of this transcendently wonderful being. Yet here in his very presence we felt perfectly at home, perfectly at ease with him. He laughed with us, he joked with us, he asked us what we thought of his roses. And had the Chaldean managed to keep us merry upon our way thither, he spoke to each of us individually, displaying an exact acquaintance with all our concerns collectively and personally. Then finally he came to the reason for his invitation to us to visit him. In company with my friends, he said, I have visited the dark realms, and I have recounted what I had seen there. He thought that it would be in the nature of a pleasant contrast if we were to visit the highest realm and see for ourselves some of its beauties, to show that the inhabitants of such high realms are not shadowy, unreal people, but on the contrary, they are like ourselves, capable of feeling and exhibiting the emotions of their fine natures, capable of human understanding, of human thought, and as easily susceptible to laughter and free-hearted merriment as were we ourselves. And he had asked us to visit him in order to tell us himself that these realms wherein we were now visiting were within the reach of every soul that is born upon the earth plane, that no one can deprive us of that right, that although it may take countless years of time to reach those realms, yet there is all eternity in which to achieve that end, and that there are unlimited means to help us upon our way. That, he said, is the simple, great fact of spirit life. There are no mysteries attached to it. All is perfectly straightforward, plain, and unrestricted by complicated beliefs, religious or otherwise. It requires no adherence to any particular form of orthodox religion, which of itself has no authority to assure any single soul of its powers to secure the soul's salvation. No religious body that ever existed can do that. And so this realm of incomparable beauty was free and open to all to work their way thither from the very lowest and foulest realm. It may take eons of time to accomplish, but that is the great and superb finale of the lives of the earth's worlds of millions of souls. Our good friend, the Chaldean, then mentioned to his master that our stay had almost reached its limit. The latter said he was sorry to observe that it was so, but that such powers as he had been invoked for us had their limitations, and so for our comfort we must work within them. However, he added, there are other occasions, and thus he extended further invitations to us. We now rose, and I could not resist the lure of the view of the roses from the window. I gazed out once more, and then we made ready to depart. Our gracious host said he would accompany us to the hill from which we had had our first glimpse of his kingdom. We followed a different route from that by which we had reached the palace, and what was our delight when it led us directly to the rose bed. Stooping, our host culled 3 of the choicest blooms that mortal eyes ever beheld, and presented one to each of us. Our joy was still further heightened by the knowledge that, with the affection that we should shower upon them, the blooms would never fade and die. My one anxiety was that in taking them to our own realm, we should see them crushed, perhaps, by the unaccustomed density of our heavier atmosphere. But our host assured us that they would not, for they would be borne up by our thoughts of them and of the giver, and between the one and the other they would be amply supported and would so remain. At length we reached our point of departure. Words would not express our feelings, but our thoughts passed unfailingly to him who had brought us this supreme happiness, his foretaste of our destiny, and of the destiny of the whole earth world and the whole spirit world, and with a blessing upon us all, and with a smile of such affection, of such ineffable benignity, he bade us Godspeed, and we found ourselves once more in our own realm. I have tried to tell you something of what we saw, but words cannot be found to describe it, because I cannot translate the purely spiritual into earthly terms. My account must therefore fall short, far short. And so also in those other matters of which I have treated, to give you a comprehensive account of all that we have seen in the world of spirit would fill many volumes, and therefore I have chosen what I felt would be of the most interest and benefit. My earnest wish is that I have captured your interest, taken you away for a moment from the pressing affairs of earthly life, and given you a glimpse of the world beyond, the world in which you are now living. But I have brought a measure of comfort. If I have brought a measure of comfort or of good hope, then great is my reward. And I would say to you, and I can't pronounce that, it's Latin, I think. I forget it. I'm terrible with words, but this has been beautiful, and this is the end. There's no more after this. Very impressive book. I was very impressed with it. And I kind of resonate with everything that he said. I believe this may be a very true account. Let's see, there was something I was trying to remember that I wanted to say. I've always thought of myself, well, I can love God as good as anyone ever has loved God. I mean, what would prevent me from being able to love God as good as anybody, you know? Only my own thoughts that I couldn't would be the only thing that could prevent that. So reading this made me real happy, because in this last part he describes that all of this is something that we can do. This is a place we can be. We can aspire that high. So I'll keep on aspiring that high.